Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. The Great Resignation is Here, How to Improve Employee Retention Among Support Teams, brought to you by Technology and Services Industry Association and sponsored by SupportLogic. My name is Vanessa Lucero, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be recorded. A link to the recording of today's presentation will be sent to you within 24 hours via email. Audio will be delivered via streaming. All attendees will be in a listen-only mode, and your webinar controls, including volume, are found in the toolbar at the bottom of the webinar player. We encourage your comments and questions. If you think of a question for the presenters at any point, please submit through the Ask a Question box on the top left corner of the webinar player. We will open it up for a verbal Q&A portion at the end of today's session. Lastly, feel free to enlarge the slides to full screen at any time by selecting one of the full screen button options, which are located on the top right corner of the slide player. I would now like to introduce our presenters today. John Ragsdale, Distinguished Researcher and Vice President of Technology Ecosystems for TSIA. Krishna Raja, Founder and CEO of SupportLogic. And Angus Klein, Vice President of Global Support for Snowflake. As with all of our TSIA webinars, we do have a lot of exciting content to cover in the next 45 minutes, so let's jump right in and get started. John, over to you.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. I know that everybody is deep in planning for 2022, and we wanted to come to you with one of our last webinars of the year to talk about the importance of employee retention. We're going to be discussing some of the elements that contribute to employee programs that improve retention and employee satisfaction, and of course some of the links between employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction, which TSI data has been showing correlations for many, many years on this. So on the topic of the Great Resignation, this was a term I first heard in a series of articles in the New York Times, and in fact, last week they published an article saying that this Great Resignation really hit a peak in August with 4.3 million Americans, nearly 3% of the workforce, quitting their jobs. And there's a lot of thinking that this isn't over yet. I think that the tech industry has escaped some of the worst of this. I have some data here showing employee attrition rates, both overall attrition and voluntary attrition for support organizations. We definitely saw quite a rise last year from 7.3 pre-pandemic to 8.2 in 2020. The numbers are back down a little in 2021, down to 7.6. But, you know, there is some potential for a lot of attrition coming up in 2022. A couple of reasons. The tech industry is really booming. I know here in Silicon Valley, it's harder and harder to find really qualified talent, and experienced workers are in great demand. And although I think the latest variant is probably causing a lot of companies to rethink this, but there were starting to be discussions of reopening and bringing people back in the office in early 2022, and workers who have really fallen in love with working from home, if their companies are beginning to hint that they're going to be coming back into the office, that may push some people out the door. And this is slightly controversial, but there have been some studies showing that employees who were hired during the pandemic and have never come into the office and only been remote and virtual may have less loyalty to the company because they haven't established those in-person relationships that you get from, you know, talking to people in the office and going out to lunch together, et cetera. So before I share a few more data points around attrition and employee engagement, I'd like to bring our guest speakers into the conversation. Krishna, Angus, both of you are working for very successful tech companies. I know you're both growing a lot. Are you seeing it more and more difficult to bring in talent, or do you have concerns about attrition? Angus, could we start with you?
Yeah, hi there. My name is Angus Klein. I am entrusted to run Snowflake support. I do see that, John, and I think if you take a step back and you think about how, generally speaking, support people are predisposed to having a lot of skills and abilities and desire to be customer advocates and to bring those skills to bear. In a Zoom world today, where you're not commuting and you are already combating the fatigue that's associated with sort of continual Zoom sessions, the risk is even higher for support personnel to burn out because time can be consumed with customer needs without fail every single time. There's never a day in a support department where any employee feels like, wow, I'm way ahead of my work. So the demand is always going to be there. So if the hours extend, you run the risk of burnout.
Yeah, Krishna, what about you? What are you seeing at Support Logic?
Yeah, I mean, we are growing really fast, and hiring talent is becoming more and more challenging by the day. So this is in alignment with the rest of what the industry is seeing. But with respect to, I mean, we are hiring across the board. We're not just hiring for support function. We are hiring developers and machine learning engineers and whatnot. But with respect to support, the point that Angus said resonates with me quite well because I did a lot of recruiting for support for VMware back in 2002, 2004 time period. Even back then, hiring was extremely difficult for support because often people don't fully understand the attractiveness of a support role. So you have to go sell it to them, why they need to do support, especially when you want to hire high-tech talent to do support. The high-tech talent is more drawn towards doing other stuff, not just support. So we have to do a lot of selling to hire. So hiring is challenge has always been challenging, and I think this pandemic and the Great Resignation, what we are seeing right now, definitely is making it worse for support organizations.
Well, thanks both Krishna and Angus for those comments, and I'll be turning it over to both of you for more conversation in just a minute. I got a couple more slides and some data points to share. If we look at some of the programs or approaches that tend to improve employee satisfaction and retention, one of those is having an employee engagement program, which was a really popular topic a couple of years ago. We see that adoption of that continues to grow, and I've got some data here showing that while the average voluntary attrition rate is 7.6% annually, companies with an employee engagement program only average 6.9 compared to 8.9 if they don't have an engagement program. So if you don't have an employee engagement program, you really should start creating one. There should be a link in your resources section to a TSIA report, 10 elements of a successful employee engagement program. And I would just point out that if you haven't looked at your program for a while, it may need some updating because a lot of engagement was around mentoring and in-person meetings, and it could be that there are some elements of your program that need to be redefined or rethought in this virtual world that we're all in. Some other programs that we see having a correlation between good programs and attrition and ESAT include knowledge management programs, and adoption of more sophisticated support automation tools. And let's be honest, support people all know friends that do support for other companies, and they all compare notes about what the employee desktop looks like. And support techs like to have very cool tools at their disposal. So if you're kind of lagging behind other companies and your competitors, that's one more thing that may be sending employees out the door. Another thing that we see a strong correlation between employee satisfaction that you may not think about is quality monitoring programs. And you may think, oh, employees hate those because it's, people are listening in their conversations. And actually, we find that companies that are doing formal quality monitoring, including the reviewing of individual service incidents and providing feedback to employees, actually have higher employee satisfaction scores, averaging 80.2 compared to the industry average of 77.2. And we're going to be talking a little bit today about quality monitoring and automating that, but I wanted to reference what I call the continuum of quality monitoring, from the very basic to some of the more advanced capabilities we'll talk about today. But at a very basic level, we saw, managers would just be walking around kind of eavesdropping on conversations, and that could maybe give you a clue, but I don't think it was very helpful. Side by side, actually sitting and listening in on conversations, something that TSIA does when we do audits of contact centers. Silent monitoring, where you drop in on a conversation and nobody knows you're there to eavesdrop. And then the more formal programs, the manual recording and reviewing of conversations. And this has really been the standard that companies have been using for quite a few years. The challenge with doing this manually is typically you only are able to review 1 or 2 employee interactions a week or even a month. And if you happen to catch that one bad call they had that day, it could change your perspective of that employee when normally they're doing well. And moving to an automated approach to quality monitoring means that you're really analyzing 100% of their interactions. And we are seeing some early case studies showing that employees really like this approach because, on one hand, they view the feedback they're receiving as more impartial because it's being done by machines, so they can't say that their manager is picking on them. But I also published a case study earlier this year with CSC Corp showing that by automating quality monitoring, they were giving so much more feedback in a rapid fashion to employees, they were able to improve and get promoted faster. So if you don't have a quality monitoring program today, you absolutely should consider it. It is coaching and positive feedback for employees, but we're going to talk today about some of the more automated approaches, so you don't have to have a whole team assigned to listen to conversations and provide feedback. Well, that's enough from me. I'd like to turn it over to our guest speakers today. And Krishna, I'm going to turn it over to you to start. Krishna Rajraja is the CEO and co-founder of SupportLogic. Krishna, take it away.
Yeah, John, thanks for the introduction. I think your last comment, you hit the point very, very clearly, which is that positive reinforcement is extremely important for retention, because as a support person, you're dealing with a lot of negative feelings from your customers and frustration from your customers. Things always goes wrong. You have to go fix it. So when you fix it, when something positive happens, that positive reinforcement and recognizing that actually goes a long way when it comes to employee retention. With that said, let me do a quick introduction about myself. So I'm the founder and CEO of SupportLogic. SupportLogic is a company founded on the core principle that every customer conversation has useful signals for every persona within the company, whether it is your support organization, whether it's your product teams, whether it's your customer success teams or sales teams. There's a lot of knowledge hidden in day-to-day customer conversations that your support engineers are having with your customers. How do we harness that signal? How do we use that signal to transform your business, transform your support role, that's what SupportLogic is focused on. John, over to you.
All right. My name is Angus Klein again, and I manage global support for Snowflake. To give you a little context on our team, we're a follow-the-sun model, have multiple centers around the globe, Most of our customers are multinational, large conglomerates, so they're needing 24/7 consistent experience across the globe. You'll see the NPS reference there. A lot of that has to do with how the product shows up as well. So, and how we take care of our customers. So, a lot of work goes into that. General approach is to take an outside-in approach to the support vision. We're constantly having our signals open for customers and to employees. And then the other thing that's deeply relevant to what we're talking about here in terms of quality monitoring, we actually, in a 12-month period ending just about a month ago, we had manually reviewed 12.5% of our cases. And then tech support managers look at that not just from a straight technical point of view, but they look across case management, customer management, troubleshooting skills, the ability to sort of quarterback a case, to borrow an adage from American football. And then of these manual reviews, the tech support managers then provide coaching and acknowledge also when they're doing a great job. What's exciting is that manual work is not exciting to anybody. Let's be real, right? So that's where, I met Krishna in 2018, and, in Snowflake support leadership, we make a habit of talking to roughly 2 or 3 vendors a month just to see what cutting edge technology is out there, and particularly in the AI ML space. And I'm rather, the Angus of today is thanking the Angus of 2018 for saying yes to a meeting with Krishna and then getting into what the support logic tool can do, because we're going to talk a little bit later about how we helped a gentleman from my team, Chris Todd, actually helped design the automated case evaluation tooling, which isn't going to be fully automated out the gates, but it serves up candidates for cases that should be looked at for review. So that's me.
So Krishna, before we dive into our discussion, do you want to give a little bit of info on the support platform that Support Logic offers?
Yeah, absolutely. At the very high level, we process all the conversations, the back and forth that happens between a support engineer and a customer that is getting recorded in your underlying ticketing system. And the ticketing system could be anything. It could be Salesforce, Zendesk, Microsoft Dynamics, you name it. We support it. What we do on top of that is the signals that we extract. When you extract the signals and maintain context of the signals across conversational boundaries, we can do a number of interesting things. We can give early warning. We can give alerting to the right stakeholders within the company about what's happening in a customer account. We can facilitate collaboration between support and other different personas. We can predict escalations, which is one of our top use cases. Not only we can predict escalations, we actually help organizations to prevent escalations from those predictions. Account management, product trends, and so on and so forth. But one that is highlighted in the slide, which is the focus for the topic today, is the signals that we are looking at is not just incoming signals from customers, but also we can look at outgoing signals from your support engineers to your customers. So when you start looking at outgoing signals, you can spot soft skill gaps. You can spot best practices not being followed up by your support engineers when they're communicating with your customers, so on and so forth. Often, for high-tech products, you want to hire somebody who has the technical skills because they need the technical skills to support the product. And then you have to teach them soft skills. So this coaching becomes a very essential component because it's very difficult to have somebody with high soft skills and teach them high-tech skills. The vice versa is doable. So that's what our platform enables us to do. And this is something we partnered with Angus, super excited about talking about that today. And we love doing these kind of design partnership with our customers. We really understand the use case, the workflows with our customers, and build something that is very relevant to what you do on a day-to-day basis.
So I know we've got a slide here on the collaboration. Could you two talk about how you work together and this agent evaluation and quality monitoring capabilities you've been working on?
Angus, do you want to go first here?
Yeah, sure. So I referenced the sort of manual process of reviewing cases, we knew, we were hearing loud and clear from our tech support managers around the globe that it's extremely difficult to balance, focus on those things, and manage the day-to-day operations. But nonetheless, if you don't lean into a quality program, you really don't see the signals that you need, where coaching needs to happen, where training might need to happen. To Krishna's point, the confluence of skills that make up an experienced support engineer kind of unparalleled. And so when we would look for things that fall into what we call 5 elements of the Snowflake support brand, anywhere from customer service skills or advocacy, troubleshooting skills that are distinct from sort of product knowledge skills. They're related, but troubleshooting is a methodology that, if done right, inspires confidence in the customer that you have a rhyme and a reason to what you're doing. So there's all these elements that make up a good experience in a case. And I always advocate for people to realize that a support case is essentially the vehicle where support is delivered as a product. Avoiding cases is smart because the best case is one that never happened, and if you can solve them faster. But this tooling actually allows you to extrapolate signals that any support leader says they can extrapolate signals without tooling across several thousand cases, and in our case 20,000 customer interactions a week. Nobody can extrapolate intelligent signals out of that type of noisy system, because support by nature is a noisy system, and the signal to noise ratio is difficult at best. And so this allows us to, we took those elements of the manual case reviews and partnered with Krishna's team. Their product folks are super open-minded and collaborative. So it wasn't like a build a BRD here, go build it. It was highly iterative, and I would say agile in that sense. So that's kind of the context in the background.
So, I think adoption of quality monitoring in general is like 100% of consumer-facing companies tend to do it. But adoption in B2B companies is much lower. And one of the pushbacks I hear is, these are degreed professionals. We don't need to be micromanaging them. Give me, the reasoning why it is just as important in B2B as it is in B2C.
Because to the degree that a support engineer is solid at communication, expectation setting, all the soft skills, think of it as a bicycle. The back wheel is the power. That's your technical knowledge. The front wheel is steer the bike. And you need those soft skills and troubleshooting skills in order to steer the bike. You could have the most powerful bike in the world, but if you can't steer it towards better customer experience, you're basically aimless on that bike.
Yeah, one thing I would add, John, here is that one of the reasons we think that this adoption is low for B2B is there's really not good products out there for solving this issue for B2B use cases. B2B use cases, it's not very transactional as we all know it. There's a lot of back and forth communication. Most of the communications tend to happen via email or text-based data, not necessarily voice. There's also voice interleaved, but not everything happens through voice. So you need a tool that can process this for this back and forth communication with customers. And also, you need to look at the technical component of solving the issue, and also the non-technical component of the issue. And those are completely two different streams where you can coach your support engineers. And I think to the point of significance that you pointed out, John, for support engineers, career progression is one of the most important things for them to feel. I mean, it's one of the biggest retention tactic that you can have for support engineers, right? Once the redundancy of doing the same support cases comes with time, the boredom sets in, and people want to go do other stuff, either within your same organization or they want to go work for a different company. So you want to show career progression on the technical side. You also want to show career progression on the soft skill side. And for me personally, when I was doing support, I found both of them to be very fascinating. I was learning more about the product every day, and I wanted to do different kinds of issues so that I learned more about the product, and I learned more about not only the product that I was supporting, but the ecosystem that surrounds that product and how they work. The curious mind in me really was fascinated by it. Simultaneously, I was learning a lot of soft skill aspects of dealing with customers, which also was very, very interesting. So coaching that, and if an organization is spending time for you to coach both, it's very rewarding for support engineers, and that translates into better retention.
Yeah, I would just add, like, if you think about a sense of connectedness in today's world, support people by nature are social for the most part. They thrive on gaining and sharing knowledge, and that typically works best in smaller groups of support engineers as opposed to hundreds of them. And I'll never, and so that sense of connectedness really matters. I'll never forget. I had a great support engineer here at Snowflake say to me, Angus, I really like weekend work. And I looked at him kind of crazy and said, like, what are you, crazy? Like, you work pretty hard Monday through Friday, man. Like, what is it? And, you really want to work that much? And he said, no, not really. But on a weekend, I know who my crew is. I have a sense of connectedness to the X amount of people that are going to be on call that weekend. And there's a sense of, we're in this together. Collectively, we know a lot of things. None of us know everything in a single way. So that sense of connectedness, and when I first started thinking about quality programs, to be honest with you, I was a little skeptical that a quality monitoring program could actually positively impact that sense of connectedness. But in today's world, like, coaching managers that take the time to coach, and some people hear the word coach and they only have the negative filter on it, like, oh, coaching, that means my boss is going to tell me what I'm not doing right. If you're a good people manager, you're enabling your people. That you see your job as enabling support engineers to take care of customers better and to retain them. And I guess the other thing I would say is, like, one thing that's really, really become a very poignant point for us at Snowflake is you can't underestimate the value of retaining experienced support engineers on your staff, because if you have any real intention of, like, if you're in a hyper-growth business, which I suspect many in our audience are, and you're trying to scale a support department, you can't do it without the knowledge that's in senior support engineers. I don't say that as a title. I mean, like, more experienced support engineers that you're able to keep around. You can't replace that IP, that intellectual property, that knowledge easily. And so anything you can do, and, like, you think about knowledge management, where are you going to get the content other than your experienced support engineers? You talk about, tooling. Where are you going to get the input anywhere other than your experienced support engineers on what tooling you should build? In other words, that they become like this incredibly valuable input into everything that equals improved CX and scale. And so everything you can do, to Krishna's point, to keep them engaged and feeling like they're growing in the ways that they want to grow, you stand a chance of really improving your operations.
So we're
Yeah,
getting
I think,
a few questions in from the audience. If you do have a question for Krishna or Angus, go ahead and submit them. We'll get to as many of those as possible. Krishna, sorry I interrupted.
oh, no issues. I just wanted to add one more item on top. I think one of the reasons why the Great Resignation is happening today, I think you kind of alluded to this in the beginning in your opening remark, is that with people working remotely, the sense of connectedness is very difficult to establish, right? We have people in our company, we are hired 1 year into the company, we have not met them in person. And so now we're meeting them. I'm actually at the company offsite and we're meeting them. And for the very first time, the sense of connectedness is very, very important, especially for support. When you're an engineer, you're working in isolation, you just work on coding, you just need your machine, you just code, you go on to the next task. Support is highly collaborative. You trade tips, you trade notes. And when you don't have that system, easy way to do this, that also plays into the role of not having a sense of connectedness and not feeling like you're growing, and it just becomes like a repetitive task and boredom. I think that's part of the reason I think the Great Resignation will have an impact for the support teams, in addition to other factors that we talked about.
So we're getting some questions asking what sort of feedback is the system providing to employees? Angus, could you give us some examples of the sort of insights that you're getting from the technology and the sort of coaching you're able to give your employees based on that?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, NLP is kind of the center of it, right? So, I think of a case as a life, like as a life cycle. It's a living thing until the customer says they're happy, right? So in that life cycle, you're likely to have many interactions. So the tool can discern when a customer is having to prompt the support engineer for updates. The tool can discern when the trajectory of the case is not being quarterbacked enough. In other words, driven. Because the reality is, in any given support case, you're going to have multiple resources, often from other departments. But the owner of the case needs to treat it like they're the host of that case, which is a lot of work. And so essentially what the tool surfaces is how good of a host you were or are being. And then later things like, if for example, one way to upset a customer is to ask them for data but don't explain why. Right? So the tool can surface that type of thing as well. In the long run, I can envision a system where you're in a case tracking system and these things are surfaced in private comments in a case tracking system, prompting the support engineer to pay attention to either sentiment or something lacking in the case management process.
So the actual data that you are analyzing, I know that it's getting easier to do things like voice to text. Salesforce even offers a plugin for that now. Krishna, are you looking at just case notes or conversations, chat dialogues? What all are you analyzing?
Anything that gets stored into the ticketing system, whether it's voice to text or chat conversations or internal case notes, we can process that and we can provide guidelines. What we're looking for is what is the best practice that you want to do when you're interacting with customers? And you can break that down, best practices, into what do you say when you first interact with a customer? What do you say in the middle of the case lifecycle? What do you do when customers wants to escalate a case? What do you do when the priority of the case gets bumped up? What do you do when the case gets closed? Those are the various different steps, the life cycle that Angus was talking about. So we can monitor all of those and give best practice recommendations that are being followed or not being followed. And we've done it in a way that this could be templatized and customized for your specific use case. So you can go and configure it the way you want it. You can say, these are the 5 things I care about in my support quality auditing process, and you can program that to only monitor those. So that's what our system does, and yes, it works on pretty much any text content that is stored in the ticketing system.
So we've done a couple of webinars previously with Support Logic with some customers using your technology for escalation prediction, automated health scores. Is this just an additional use case for the same analysis you're doing?
Yeah, it weaves into all of those use cases. So we have modules for predicting escalations and managing escalations effectively, giving proactive warning to both the support management, the customer success team, as well as the support engineer who's handling the case, saying this case is likely to escalate. In addition to that, we also do case routing. We can route the case to the right support engineer based on their skill sets, based on their backlog, and based on how this support engineer has interacted with this customer in the past. Is that mostly positive or negative? So we take all of those factors also and we can make recommendations. This dovetails into that. So when you're interacting with those customers, and we give you a recommendation, the case will get escalated, what best practices that you're following or not following, and you can track that, and we can give you a checklist system, and a manager can actually review this. The entire case at this point becomes like a Google Doc, and you can review this case with annotations and notes with your support engineers, and the feedback goes directly to support engineers. So this process is automated, so often you don't know which cases to sample. To Angus' point, you have 20,000 interactions in a week. Which ones you're going to focus on? So the system automatically gives you guidance on these are the interactions you may want to focus on, and these are the interactions that are failing some of the criteria that you set for yourself, and have an open dialogue with your support engineers and coach them and make them better so that every customer interaction they're having gets better with time. So that's the kind of the principle behind it. It dovetails into all the other functionality that we already have on the platform.
You know, we've been hearing a lot about millennial workers and Gen Z workers, that they really are looking for a lot more feedback than previous generations wanted. I think previous generations sometimes were afraid to talk to the manager. So this seems to, you know, be the right tool for the right time, because if employees are demanding more feedback, the more we can automate to provide them more feedback seems like a smart thing to do. We got a question here from Dave asking if Support Logic can be used to identify stellar support interactions and customers who are raving fans. And, you know, we know that a lot of customer success managers are now being tasked with identifying reference customers, and that's kind of hard to do. So that would be amazing. And I do think identifying those stellar support interactions are great, because you can send a recording of that out to the whole team to hear as sort of a coaching point. Are those options for you?
They do exist today. It's because we are tracking sentiment. We can track not only negative sentiment, we can also track positive sentiments. We can track things like whether the support engineer is giving a fast response, and the customer is acknowledging that your response has been very timely. Things like that we track. During my days of support, we used to have a practice, whenever we get a very positive feedback from a customer, we would circulate that into a mailing list. So everybody feels, recognizes it, right? This kind of positive reinforcement is super important, again, for having a sense of ownership and also guiding them in the right direction. It also improves retention when you actually do that more often. So the tool automatically does that for you today. And you can go to the dashboard and it'll tell you all the positive interactions that you had. So it's not just for identifying areas for improvement, but also highlighting areas where things went right. And that could become a case study for other support engineers who wants to review that. Oh, that was handled much better. Maybe I should follow the same.
Which I think, you know, that last point is a really valid one, because I think support engineers are going to listen to other support engineers, right, or observe their behavior. And I think David's question here is strikes to the heart of praising in public and coaching in private. Like that praising in public part matters. to support engineers for the most part. You got to be a little careful in EMEA because not everybody wants their great work exposed to that. They might have an attitude of, like, hey, I'm just doing my job. So, but I've always erred on the side of doing what Krishna said, which is we have a wall of fame, a wiki page, but we also send out emails, and that wall of fame is full of a lot of great work from support people going above and beyond, and it's fed partially by this engine.
So I'm also seeing some questions about onboarding time. It takes a number of weeks or even months to get support folks up to speed. Angus, are you finding that this kind of feedback is helping them become, better at their job and able to handle more issues faster with this sort of constant coaching?
To be honest with you, we haven't really tied it into MTTR because we're kind of like hyper focused on quality. But the reality is that it's like anything. If you invest the time up front, so let's take a case. The first, we have 3 stages in our cases. The first one is issue clarification. Anybody who's been a support engineer on this call, I know Krishna and I have both been support engineers for a non-trivial amount of our career. You know that that if you take the time to establish issue clarification, and what I mean by that is not, here's what the customer said when they filed a case in the portal, a 1-line sentence. It's the time to have a handshake with the customer to really understand and play back to the customer as a form of a handshake. Here's what I understand, the question you're asking or the help you need. Did I get that right? If you get that right in the beginning, and this tool can assess whether issue clarification is being met at, by virtue of doing that, now take 20,000 interactions a week, several thousand cases, and to the degree that you can coach and drive support engineers to get issue clarification right up front, because guess what happens when you're in front of a customer? We tend to forget that the people that are helping customers directly have a unique stress. It's not the same as your stress when you're a program manager in support or even a manager in support. That stress is right here in front of your face. And when you get nervous or you're unsure about which way to take the path of troubleshooting, you can skip the step of issue clarification. Well, by virtue of doing that, you've just ruined your MTTR. So the more you can do that right up front, the better.
Well, we are getting close to the end of our time, so I'd like to ask you both for any final thoughts. Krishna, any final thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think the key points that I want to emphasize is why the main topic that we have for discussion today is how do you retain support? And we talked about coaching as one of those solutions. Public praise as one of the other tactic. I think the other point I also want to mention is that the collaboration is also a very key component for employee retention. With hiring being difficult and onboarding being very challenging in a remote work environment, because it's very difficult to coach everything in a remote environment. Retaining your employees and getting the most value out of your existing employees is probably going to be the biggest tactic and investment that organizations are going to do in the coming year. And to me personally, for running Support Logic, that's an area I'm also focusing on. We have this talent here. How do we get the best value out of this talent? So coaching and training is going to be a key part of the strategy for next year, because hiring is going to be difficult, and retention is going to be a challenge as well. So that's a thought I want to leave to the audience.
Fantastic. Angus, final thoughts from you?
I'll just throw out a couple of things that we're doing to try to build rapport between support and engineering, and grow knowledge and support, and grow knowledge and engineering about support, because to the degree that you have a translation service between support and engineering, because by nature we don't exactly speak the same language all the time, so a translation service helps. So we've had a rotation program in support for thanks to a gal named Nandini Rao, and now run by Chris Barnes. We have a rotation program that happens very consistently, where a software developer spends several days in support, shadowing support engineers. We take copious notes afterwards. Almost invariably, the walk away from the Snowflake engineer is, wow, I didn't realize how dependent you are on engineering as part of the support continuum. And how much effort you have to make to troubleshoot issues. We could probably help you there. So and starting in February, we're going to be launching a sort of the inverse of that, but more of an immersion program for some. I was speaking about the more experienced support engineers. We're working out the details, but the general agreement is for an immersion program for experienced support engineers to spend a quarter deeply immersing with sort of the right engineering folks around product architecture and so on, and bring back to support better intel around troubleshooting and tooling and so on. So just throw those out there as other possible helpful tips.
Thank you, Angus. I'd like to quickly give a shout out to a couple of folks. Sarah Johnson and Dave Baca are research directors on TSIA's Support Services research team, and both of them did a lot of work in digging out some of the correlations that I shared. So thank you both very much for that. And I'd also like to recognize Eddie Aguilar and Lexi Provost from TSIA's Member Success Organization. They're going to be giving a breakout session at our upcoming conference in Orlando in May on this topic around improving attrition rates, and they're going to be doing some research on that topic, including a survey. So hopefully you'll all respond to that survey when it comes to you. So hopefully you can attend our event in Orlando in May and join them for their session. And with that, Vanessa, I'll turn it back to you to close this out.
Okay. Well, thank you all for a great webinar presentation today. A couple of quick reminders before we sign off. There will be an exit survey at the end of today's live webinar. Please take a few minutes to provide your feedback on the content and your experience by filling out that brief survey. And a link to the recorded version of today's webinar will be sent out within the next 24 hours. I'd now like to take this time to thank our presenters, John, Krishna, and Angus, for delivering an outstanding session. And thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's live webinar, The Great Resignation is Here: How to Improve Employee Retention Among Support Teams, brought to you by Technology and Services Industry Association and sponsored by Support Logic. We look forward to seeing you at our next TSIA webinar. Take care, everyone.